Here we are wrapping up day one of sunny Manchester, the 1st of June. In fact, you say summer is here, and such a sunny face with us is big old, what are you now, level 3, Judge Kim? So we got some huge changes coming in next month, which were announced just a few days previous. I thought maybe you could take us through them. The first one being the Legends rules changing.
Yep, so this is probably going to be the biggest one, or the one that has the most impact for players. Basically, instead of having legends sort of annihilate each other as soon as the second one is played, they'll only check the creatures that the cards that you control to see whether they.
So previously, legends on the other side of the board would cancel each other out.
Yeah, if there was a legend with the same name on the other side of the board, and you played a legend with the same name, then both would go to the graveyard.
Yeah. Which was actually a rules change suggested by, I believe, Zvi Moshowitz very many years ago, when it used to be just the first legend came in and blocked everyone else. No one else shall ever come. And
that was pretty bad for Kamigawa, so I think they changed it about that point.
So, on a similar note with the Planeswalkers as well, it kind of falls under this.
Yeah, it's technically a separate rule. It's the Planeswalkers uniqueness rule, but it's basically changed in parallel, yeah.
So we have, like, what do we have? 3 or 4 different Jaces now, 3 or 4 different Lilianas, and they can all sort of tag each other in and out now.
Pretty much, it's with Planeswalkers. It looks at the Planeswalker type, so you can't control 2 different Jaces. You can only have one at a time.
Now, we're big on helping new players into the game, and one of the things that always, I think, sort of stopped new players from really embracing sort of PTQs was how harsh they were punished for like deck registration errors. Now finally it seems Wizards have come up with a really good policy to stop punishing people twice for making a mistake. So we have the sideboard options first.
Yep. Again, this is unlikely to actually make a huge amount of difference to most players. I think there's been a reasonable number of pros who've written on the fact that there's not a huge amount of point for having a sideboard of less than 15 cards. But yes, basically now you can register a sideboard of up to 15 cards, rather than having to be exactly 0 or 15, which is making some judges panic, but is probably fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great change because, I mean, anyone who accidentally leaves a card off, I mean, under the existing rules, if they had a 14-card sideboard, what would happen?
If a player has a 14-card sideboard, it sort of depends on what the situation is. If they've only registered 14 cards on their deck list, then they will get a game loss for it.
Okay.
If they've registered 15 cards on their deck list and we do a deck check and find that they have 14, then we tend to just write down they've lost a sideboard card.
So when they had this 14th card, would they have to then write a basic land as a 15th card?
Yes.
Okay, so
of their choice.
So moving on to the second choice, which is, of course, you had a 60-card main deck, typically, and up to a 15-card sideboard, and now, let's say you're playing against your opponent who's doing a mill strategy, all of a sudden you can have a 75-card main deck?
Yeah, this is where it probably gets quite a lot more interesting. That in Constructed, you used to have to sideboard 1 for 1. Now Constructed's lined up with Limited, which is as long as your sideboard is not more than 15 and your main deck is not less than 60, you can sideboard however you like.
So it helps speed up the game a little bit as well, doesn't it? Because we used to get times where people would be paranoid about making sure they got the 15 in sideboard. So they'd start shuffling, have I got 15 again?
Yeah, it also probably makes, it also sort of augments the skill level in sideboarding even further, because it's going to be very tempting for players who are less confident just to bring cards in and then just not take something out.
Yes.
Which isn't necessarily going to be the optimal
So
play.
it allows the bad players to play even worse then, is it?
That's definitely a thing which could happen.
Anyway, we're wrapping up day 1 of the PTQ. In fact, we're just waiting for one of the semi-finals to finish. We've got a final which you'll be seeing right after this on the next video. But have we had any sort of interesting judging rulings, anything like that cropped up through today? Because, I mean, let's just be honest. I've said it again. I'm going to say it so many times. Over 300 players. No person in the UK has ever had to deal with this outside of a Grand Prix or a Pro Tour.
So conveniently tying in with what we were saying about earlier with the rules changes, we've had so the way indestructibility currently works is it doesn't count as a keyword ability. So if you give something indestructibility and then loses it, it's still indestructible currently. So we've had a lot of interactions with turn and burn, where, for example, a Predator Ooze has been turned and burned and survive and dies, because it's written is indestructible on the card, so it loses that ability. But something which was given indestructibility in response to a turn and burn does not die, which won't be the case from July 13th. Everything will die.
Which I think is a good simplification of the rules.
It definitely makes it much easier from having had to explain to a player why the card didn't die when obviously it should.
So the actual name for what indestructible will become?
It will still be.
Is it a super type? What's it actually called now?
It's not really called anything at the moment.
Okay.
It's indestructible is just a thing
so
which
it's
is
a keyword. So
it's
like
not a keyword.
Not a keyword.
That's
like
the point.
flying and.
Yeah. At the moment, indestructible and unblockable are not keywords. They're just things which are true.
Mm-hmm.
As of July 13th, indestructible will be a keyword and unblockable will not exist.
So I think day one being close to wrap up. I mean, this is something for the resume, isn't it? The fact that you managed to get through a day like this.
Yeah, this has been a pretty big one.
And we think tomorrow,
Small.
200, 150. I mean, because you've got to qualify for tomorrow. It's a WMCQ as opposed to a PTQ.
Technically, I think there's about 400 or 500 players qualified, but I would be very surprised if we see half of them.
And finally, what do you think this means for sort of Northern Magic? Because, I mean, this is 104 players bigger than the previous PTQ in the whole of the country. And indeed, the London mob, they all bragged about beating Manchester by about 7 people, I think it was last time with their last PTQ. And now we've crushed them mercilessly up north.
In defence of the London mob, they were also running across against WMCQs, but yes. I think it shows that Northern Magic is definitely a thing that needs to be more considered. There was obviously, for a few years, there was a trend of a very great proportion of events going to the south. It's started to reverse, not reverse, but even out in the last year or so, the last few seasons, with, Manchester and Sheffield both getting events in a season and things like that. But it's been noted that pretty much Manchester has had the biggest PTQ in every season where it's had a PTQ.
Now, I want to finish with a tough question. You don't have to answer this if you can't answer this. 300 player events, they're not easy to run the buildings you need to host such an event. How many places in UK could, if Magic continues to grow the way it does, how many places in UK could feasibly run a 300, 400 player PTQ? Because I can't think of that many.
I think one of the things that Dave demonstrated today is that if you need to run a 300-player PTQ, you will find a way to do it. Think that we
had an overflow room, right?
Yeah. Overflow rooms have actually been something that's been relatively common at PTQs for a couple of years now. And I think that basically TOs will just adjust the size of their overflow room. So rather than having a 200-person venue and a 10-player overflow room, you'll start seeing a 200-person venue and maybe a 50-player overflow room. Flow.
So, double header, I think, resounding success, right?
Yeah, it definitely appears to have been a much greater success than the independent events that were running around last year.
So obviously, you're probably in no position to be able to say with authority that this is going to happen again, but it certainly seems like this should happen again.
As far as I'm aware, it's been quite successful in several countries, at least in Europe. I can't speak about the US because I don't know, which suggests it might be a thing that will be looked at happening again. I know that introducing the double headers was in response to player feedback from last year to try and make the weekends feel more special.
Something we used to have years and years ago. Doncaster was very famous, used to have a double header on a Saturday and Sunday PTQs. But of course, I think the big thing though is the fact that it was the same format for both days. Yeah. So it allowed people to actually do some solid testing and have those two sort of shots. So one being a WMCQ, which let's face it, everyone wants to play it. It's as powerful as a PTQ win.
What will be interesting to see next year is with the 4th Pro Tour coming in and the extra limited season, I don't believe that we know the exact timings of the seasons for either the WMCQs or for the PTQs. So it'll be interesting if the standard seasons still line up in that new model or not.
Because one of the things actually, when they dropped from 5 Pro Tours down to 4 and then down to 3, a lot of people really used to love the team events. And they had to kind of go to the wayside a little bit. But then they brought it all the way back with stuff like Modern Masters, which again, you know, was like something new. They just sort of brought in this this one-off Grand Prix in Las Vegas.
I might be going to that to play.
It seems like, again, just like people are coming out of the woodwork for this.
Yeah.
You know, this is like a sort of a really unique experience. Is this where you think Wizards are going to be going in the future with the marketing to just offer new experiences to sort of innovate the scene?
Yeah, I think this is a thing they're definitely planning to do. They've been showing it on the way they've been changing pre-releases as well. They've been very much, instead of the pre-release being just you turn up, you play a tournament, you go home, they've been doing things like the maze and Dragon's Maze, the Hell
The
Vault.
high-fiving your friend for achievements.
It's all geared towards making experiences rather than just making
Is this like
cards.
Is this like a throwback to like 4 years ago when they started going to places like Honolulu and stuff like that, and crazy PTs?
I don't know if it's a throwback or not, but they definitely still plan to go
Anyway,
to Honolulu.
we've got a Pro Tour final qualifier to play, so we'll crack right on with that. And thanks again to Kim, and
Anytime.
have a good day's judging today and tomorrow.